Hi, this is Kate Magic, and you're listening to the Raw Living podcast. Raw Living is Europe's leading raw foods and superfood supplier, and I founded the company back in 2002. In this interview series, I'm talking to some of the people behind the brands that we offer on our shop to find out what exactly is the ethos behind the company. Not just the ingredients that they use and the processes that they use to create the end results, but I'm asking them other questions like how do they show respect for the environment, how do they treat their workers, and their relationship to the farmers who grow the crops. All the companies that we work with are putting huge amounts of dedication and commitment into creating products that are benefiting not just you, but also the whole ecosystem, the planet, the people. And with this series, I'm hoping to show insights into that. When you're shopping with these companies, you're really not just investing in your health, you're truly investing in a better world for us all. Today I'm speaking with Adam and Faye from Loving Foods about their fermented goods that they produce in Manchester. Hi, Adam and Faye, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Yeah, we've never actually spoken before, but I've been I've been loving your foods for a few years now. I'm not sure how I came across them initially, but you started out in Manchester, right? Do you want to tell us the story of how you got started?
Yeah, so we started in 2016, I think. So we've just started our 7th year, and we started actually in a shed in our back garden. Like a lot of kind of challenger startups, we dug a big hole in the back garden, built a shed, and we started there. And I guess the reason we started the company, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis a few years ago. Faye has always suffered a lot with IBS. And I was prescribed steroids for my condition that I didn't really want to take. So at that point, we started looking into diet and lifestyle changes and what we could do. And we kind of started on this journey of discovery towards sort of better eating and better health and understanding the role of the gut in plays in overall health and the immune system. And as part of that journey, we were kind of introduced to probiotics and fermented foods by Faye's brother, who's a nutritional therapist. So he taught us about that. He taught us how to make sauerkraut, kimchi, and kombucha, and we started doing that at home. And certainly for me, it really helped. I think it helped Faye as well. And when Faye's brother Mendel, when he moved back to the UK from where he was living, we were kind of at a stage where we wanted to do something with all of the knowledge that we built up over the years, and it just seemed like an interesting business. I think at the time in 2016 there were like 2 companies that were making proper fermented foods, unpasteurized, live, organic fermented foods, and we just thought it was a really interesting business. We built a shed in the garden and we started producing. I mean, when we started, we jumped right in and we were doing, I think, 4 different flavors of vegetables and 4 different types of kombucha, which was, in hindsight, completely insane because we were operating in a shed. I mean, I say a shed, it was kitted out like a proper kitchen, but it was 8 foot by 20 foot. It was tiny. So we had tanks down one side, we had tables down the other, we had a sink at the back, and there was very little space, but we managed there for how long?
God, it must have been 18 months.
Maybe 18 months. I had another job, so I was doing kind of the business side in the back end, but Faye and Mendel were in the kitchen doing the work. If Faye would come in sometimes at 11 o'clock at night, having been scrubbing cabbage juice off the floor. But that's, that is kind of how we started. And then after 18 months, things were growing. We needed more space. We moved to a factory in Trafford Park, and then the middle of last year we had to move again, and we've now moved to another factory in Eccles. And I hope to never have to move again because that was very, very difficult. And certainly for the next 5 or 6 years or so, we're staying there, I think. But that's kind of how we started and why we started the business.
So I think the other companies that started around the same time as you have both gone out of business now, so you must be the longest standing raw fermentation company at the moment. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think we probably are. And I think I certainly think we're the largest of our kind. There's 1 or 2 other companies that spring to mind, but there's not many that kind of tick all the important boxes for us. And, Faye can tell you a little bit about, kind of our ethos, but really to make sure that the products are organic and packaged in glass and properly
Right.
fermented, not pasteurized. I don't really think there's anyone that does that, but we're
Right.
certainly.
So that makes both the veggies and the drinks.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have a whole range of products, but yes, I don't really think there's anyone that does it, and now definitely not in the quantity that we produce.
Right. So who develops the recipes? Is that you, Faye? Because you have some really brilliant flavor profiles in there.
No, it's actually Mendel, my brother. So he developed these recipes, or some of the recipes, actually before Loving Food started. He was making them to sell in a market in another country where he was living at the time. But he'd been making fermented foods for probably 20 years now, or maybe more. Yeah, they are his recipes. Actually, he's the brain behind the flavors.
I remember we went to stay with him, and he gave us this kimchi, and it was the first time we'd ever tried it, and we were just blown away by the taste. Never really tasted anything like it. Couldn't stop eating it. That kind of really sort of was the start of our interest in it, really. But they are great flavors. But no, he developed all those flavors and also the processes that we use, which are really important because it's very easy as you scale up a business to start taking shortcuts and making changes and doing things in a different way that, maybe not traditional, using, artificial ingredients or additives and things. And it was really important to us that as we scaled up, that we still were making the products in the same way that you would do at home. And that is not easy to do. And that's required a lot of thinking about how we do that and how we scale it. And he was kind of a big part of that.
The curtido is my favorite. Do you want to talk us through the different flavors of sauerkraut and kimchi that you have?
Yeah, so we have the basic, what we would call the classic sauerkraut, which is just the cabbage with salt. And then we have it's actually my favorite sauerkraut, the caraway and juniper berry sauerkraut. Although actually not many people seem to like that one as much as the others.
They don't, and it's my favorite as well. But it doesn't sell as well. I don't know if people are put off by the juniper berries or.
Well, that's very traditional, isn't it, to put juniper berries in it?
Yeah, we really love it, but people prefer the classic one.
Which is fine.
Yeah,
no wrong.
It leaves more caraway one for me anyway. And then we have the curtido, which is quite spicy and lots of different veggies in there, as well as oregano.
Yeah, that's the main thing with the curtido. So the curtido is so all cultures around the world, different cultures kind of have their own version of sauerkraut. So in Eastern Europe, with the Germans and the Poles, it was sauerkraut. Kimchi, which they'll talk about, is Korean. And then in Japan, you've got things like miso and tempeh, but curtido is kind of a Latin American sauerkraut, sort of traditional Latin American one. But I agree with you, Kate. I really like it. I think it's the oregano and the fact it's one of the spiciest flavors, which is why I quite like it.
Yeah, it has a lot of flavor to it, and it's sort of in between the sauerkraut and the kimchi, because if you want something more grated, it's not as chunky as the kimchi. It gives those flavors without being chunky.
Right.
And then we've got the beetroot one, the ruby kraut, which looks amazing because of the color. And if you're a beetroot lover, then that one's great. It looks great with food as well, just because of the vibrant color.
It's also good that it's another non-spicy one. So the kimchis and the curtidos are spicy, whereas the ruby kraut's got no chili in.
And then we have the kimchis. So we have a more classic version of the kimchi, and then the turmeric and black pepper version of that one. So I'm sure you'll know, but black pepper enhances the absorption of the curcumin in the turmeric. So that's why we have that as one of our flavors. And then we also have a hot and smoky kimchi, which is one of the newer ones. And that's it's more traditional.
Yeah, it was. We wanted to follow a more traditional recipe. Our normal kimchis are not really like traditional Korean kimchi, because we don't use Chinese cabbage, because you can't get Chinese cabbage organic.
Right.
for like 3 months of the year. You can't get gochugaru, which is the red pepper paste, inorganic at all.
Right.
And traditional Korean kimchi has fish sauce and sugar and glutinous rice powder in traditionally. So we didn't want any of that in our products because they're all vegan, so and vegetarian and vegan. So the kimchi has always been a little bit different, and our hot and smoky was a way to kind of try and follow a more traditional Korean recipe in the shape of the vegetables and the color and the taste. So we added smoked paprika and some tamari, so it looks a bit more like a Korean kimchi, and it's got the texture and taste a little bit closer to a traditional Korean kimchi. It's also pretty spicy. So that was the point behind that.
Brilliant. So you mentioned that it's really important to you to keep to the traditional methods. I don't want you to divulge your trade secrets, but can you tell us anything about how you produce the kimchi and the sauerkraut? How long do you keep it fermenting for?
We ferment it for 3 weeks. And we keep the processes very similar to how you would make it yourself at home. So we wanted to produce something that was basically how you would make it yourself at home. And we didn't want to cut corners. We wanted to give everybody the opportunity to eat something very natural. And we wouldn't make it any differently for ourselves, basically. So
and there's no secret to it. I mean, we cut up vegetables and we mix them with salt. You know, the difficult bit, and the reason why there's not hundreds of different fermented vegetable producers like there are now kombucha producers is because scaling it is the difficult thing.
Right.
So, you know, the recipes, yes, and the proportions are important, but you could look at the side of our jar and work and look at the ingredients. Make your own at home, and we encourage people to do that because it's an amazing process. You know, it's just vegetables and salt, and then the natural bacteria do the rest of the work. It is a fascinating process, but there's nothing particularly secret about that. It's managing to scale up, but continuing to make it exactly the same way that you would at home, and that's not easy because if you look at the stuff that generally is shipped in from Europe, as well as coming in tins and plastic bags, it's typically not organic. It's usually pasteurized. It's quite mushy, which allows them to pump it into the packaging.
Right.
Whereas we still fill all of our jars by hand because it is impossible to do any other way with our product because it's not mushy, it won't flow. So it's labor intensive. So yeah, I would say there's no particular secret, although the flavors are great, but it's how you make as many as we do, whilst doing it exactly the same as you would at home. I think that's the tricky.
When you scale it up, what are you fermenting it in? You don't ferment it directly in the jars?
No, we don't. No, we ferment it in large stainless steel tanks. So we do have some tools to help us, you know, that you wouldn't do at home. So whereas if you were making a small amount at home, you might mix it by hand, and we did start like that. So we do have some equipment to help us. And obviously with the chopping. But once everything's mixed and processed, it goes into airtight stainless steel tanks, and then from there straight into the jars.
Right. So are they tanks that are specially produced for fermentation?
They are, yeah. They're produced in Italy, and they are specifically called fermentation tanks. Yeah, they have special airlocks. So as the product is fermenting, bacteria releasing CO2, so you need that CO2 to get out. You don't want the air to get in, and they're specially designed for that.
Right. And what's your preferred salt to use?
That is an excellent question. We've only changed our salt once over the years. We were using, actually can't remember what we were using originally, but we changed to Celtic sea salt, which for our money is one of the best in the world. It is harvested in France, again in a traditional way. It's all wooden tools. It's exactly as they used to do decades, maybe hundreds of years ago. They collect water in these shallow pools that is slowly evaporated by sunlight, and then they use the wooden tools to scrape it up, collect it, and then it's bagged up and shipped out. But it is a very, very high quality salt. It's very natural. It's full of minerals. It's actually quite good for you. We still try. We don't try. We've always maintained a very low salt content. You know, a lot of people, especially when they're dealing with health issues, are often advised to watch the salt content by the doctors. So salt is actually only needed for fermentation to sort of slow down and control the process, and a little bit of taste, but a lot of it is to control the fermentation process. You can make without salt, but the more salt you use, the more it controls, slows down the process. So some producers will use a lot of salt just to cover themselves. Our salt content is 1 gram per 100 grams, which is quite low.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
If you look at what else is out there, but the salt itself is very good quality and actually quite good for you. So that is shipped in from France, and we've been using it for probably 4 or 5 years now.
I don't know if you know, it's a kind of, I think it's a TikTok trend at the moment. That salt, it's one of our best-selling products at the moment.
Is it Celtic sea salt?
It's like a what do they call it? A viral. It's gone viral.
Really?
I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, people keep telling us we need to get on TikTok.
So let's move on to the drinks. Tell us about how you make those.
So the drinks they're a little bit easier to make. They're quite kind of less time intensive. But we do 6 types of drinks. That is 3 flavors of kombucha, which is, for anyone that doesn't know, that is green tea that is fermented with what's called a SCOBY, which is a symbiotic culture or symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And the bacteria and the yeast consume the sugar that is added and slowly change the tea into something different, which is effectively, I always call it like a healthy soda, a healthy Coca-Cola. It's a slightly sweet, it's very slightly sweet, slightly acidic, slightly vinegary, probiotic, fizzy drink. So we make 3 of those with various flavors. And then we also make 3 Jun kombuchas, which they're brewed with honey instead of sugar, and slightly different colony of bacteria. So they taste different. But again, with all our drinks, so, we have kombucha, we have matcha and mint, raspberry and tulsi, and blueberry and lavender. And then the Jun, we have an unflavored, and we have lemon and ginger and hibiscus and lime. But when you look at every one of those ingredients, each one is the real ingredient. Right. So when we say lemon and ginger, we are bringing in lemons, we are squeezing them by hand, we are using fresh ginger, hibiscus leaves, mint leaves,
blueberries,
real blueberries,
hibiscus flowers, lavender flowers.
Yeah, so they go in and they brew. In case of matcha mint, it's brewed with the mint in. In the case of like blueberry and lavender, the blueberry juice that we've squeezed is steeped. Actually, no, we put the blueberries and the lavender in a bag, and it's steeped post-fermentation. So it's all real ingredients. And one of the things we wanted to do is because that makes the colours really vibrant, which you'll see on the website or when you actually buy the product. But we wanted to use clear glass bottles so that customers could kind of see the product, and I think the colours look pretty cool.
How long are you fermenting for, and do you have a preferred type of sugar that you use?
We do use the same sugar, but generally speaking, sugar, and the bacteria really like the plainest sugar. So, we did talk about, we discovered a product a couple of years ago, a South American sugar, a panela, I think it's called, really natural sugar, but the bacteria in kombucha like the plainest, whitest sugar. So we use an organic cane sugar and organic blossom honey for the Jun. And we ferment for different times because Jun ferments quicker. So Jun is typically 3 weeks and kombucha is typically 6 weeks.
Wow, okay. And do you use the big tanks, the same big fermentation tanks?
We use bigger tanks, actually. Our tanks are 1,000 litre tanks.
Wow.
We actually bought our tanks when we expanded from a competitor, a very well-known one called Jar Kombucha, who make very good kombucha.
Another Adam.
Oh, yes, another Adam, yeah.
Yes.
So those guys sold their business to a brewery in Europe, and all the production was shipped over there. But they had these custom-made kombucha tanks that they didn't need, and they were selling them. So we bought 6 of them. So before that, we were fermenting a lot less in smaller tanks, and now we use these large tanks.
Well, I've seen your tanks because I went to their factory in East London. So
how funny. We could probably do with a couple more, but they're all the ones after. we'll probably have to commission the building of the creation of some more tanks. But yeah, kombucha is definitely a lot easier because it's a tough process again to scale. But if you have tanks and pumps, you can do it with relatively few people. Whereas the veggies, because of the volume of produce you've got to chop and deal with, and then the jarring, it's very labor intensive. Kombucha is a little bit easier. But
So,
yeah.
let's talk about gin, because gin is probably my favorite drink in the world. I make it myself, and hardly anyone knows what it is. So I was very excited when I saw that you're producing it, and it's a lot harder, I think, to do than kombucha. Well, it's more expensive because of the honey, but it's also, I think, harder because it's harder to control, I think. Do you want to tell us about how you got introduced to gin and why you decided to bring that into your range?
I think it was Mendel.
But yeah, so actually that was the first fermented thing I made. I think Mendel gave me, I think when he moved countries, trying to remember now, he gave me a Jeune Scoby, and I was like, oh, what do I do with it? So he taught me how to make it, and I started making it at home. So that was my first experience of jeune and fermenting any kind of drink. And actually, I created more scobies from this, and that's how we it's how we started making jeune for loving foods, using the SCOBY that Mendel gave me originally.
Because they were hard to get hold of. I mean, now you can, you can buy them, as you probably know, but it was really hard to get hold of back then.
So we kept growing babies.
And it's really, it's known informally. Some of the history is a bit sort of shrouded in secrecy, but it's known informally as the champagne of kombucha, and the stories of Tibetan monks riding on horseback and carrying jun in their sort of drinks pouches. But that's what it's known as, and I just like the fact that it was kind of unique and not very common. And it's definitely got a different flavor profile because of the honey. It's really good for people that are avoiding, processed refined sugars altogether. Obviously, honey is still sugar. So when it goes into your body, it's similar, but some people just, quite rightly, although I struggle with it, avoid refined sugar altogether. So it's great for that. In terms of the fermentation process, I think it's not vastly more difficult. It ferments more quickly. So you need to be a bit more careful with it, and it's probably slightly less tolerant to temperature changes. Right. So we have to make sure we keep the room at a set temperature. But from a commercial perspective, it's great because it ferments more quickly. So
right, we did sell someone else's gin. He's not doing it anymore, but we had to stop because the bottles were exploding, and also it was turning really alcoholic. I think the honey makes it turn alcoholic more easier.
Well, that will happen with kombucha as well, but yes, it would happen faster with jun just because it's a lot more active. So we have had a couple of bottles explode only at home that we forgot about in the back of a cupboard. But because jun ferments more quickly, if you leave a bottle of our kombucha out the fridge and a bottle of jun, they will both explode eventually, but the jun will probably do it twice as quickly, just a lot more active.
I tested yours before because we had this experience before. I tested yours before we put it on the website, and I kept it out of the fridge for a couple of weeks and it didn't explode. So we're all good.
Yeah, a couple of weeks is fine. I usually tell customers that you don't want to keep jun out for longer than 3 to 4 weeks, or probably both really, just to be safe. But there was a big scandal a few years ago now in America where a lot of kombucha brands were found to contain alcohol because they'd been fermenting on the shelf, and they were all pulled from sale, and a lot of manufacturers had to change their processes. Slightly more tolerant in the UK to levels of alcohol, but you've got to keep them chilled. Anything that you're buying that is not chilled is almost certainly pasteurized, or it's had the bacteria removed in another way.
Yeah, well, I could talk about kombucha all day actually, but we won't nerd out too much.
Well, the other thing we make sure that we do, and we do with all our products because everything we have is packaged in glass, but particularly with the kombucha, a lot of companies now are moving out of glass and into cans. And I think a lot of people probably don't realize that cans have a plastic liner. So, what you have is a highly acidic product, because all fermented products are acidic. All of our products are, and you have it sitting in a plastic liner. So, from our perspective, it's not really ideal. We don't like to have food in plastic packaging as much as possible, but even more so with a fermented product because it's acidic. So everything we have our range is glass packaging.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. It's been really interesting to learn a bit more about all the care and the integrity you put into your products. Have you got anything exciting coming up that you want to tell us about?
We are working at the moment on a cool kimchi. So, we do get a lot of requests from customers. Can you make it with this? Can you make it without that? And as much as we'd love to, it's hard enough keeping up with the lines that we've got. But one of the things we do get asked for quite a lot is kimchi without the chili.
Oh.
So, at the moment we've got the 2 plain sauerkrauts and the ruby kraut, but then there's 3 kimchis that are all pretty spicy and a cortado. So we are just in the final stages of testing a kimchi without the chili, which some might argue defeats the purpose of kimchi because it's always spicy. But why should people that cannot tolerate chili, whether it's personal preference or for health reasons, why shouldn't they have kimchi?
I think that is a traditional Korean thing. They call it white kimchi.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So we're going to be launching that soon, and possibly a couple of other flavors of kimchi. But at the moment, I don't know what's sort of happened this year, but things have just gone slightly crazy. I think there's actually a combination. I think a couple of competitors aren't selling the product anymore.
Yeah.
And I think as much as we're constantly in the gut health space, so I think there's a tendency for us to think everyone kind of already knows about this stuff. I think there are a lot of people that are still discovering it, and sales this year have been pretty high. So we're kind of working really hard just to keep up with the products that we do make, never mind adding any more. But once things settle down, we will we're always looking to add to the range.
Brilliant. Well, that's really good to hear. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really lovely to chat with you.
Thank you. It's been lovely to chat to you too.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you for listening. You can check out the products we've been talking about by visiting Raw Living, rawliving.co.uk. And if you haven't got an account already, then do sign up. You get £5 off your first order. And also, please do like, subscribe and share this podcast. It really does help.